Welcome back to the digital job site for this second of two parts of wall layout and framing basics for a simple shed project for that blog post at findhomebuilding.com. In the first segment we talked about the various layouts and their purposes: 12-inch, 16-inch, 19.2-inch or 24 inches on center. This segment I wanted to add the rough openings into this wall framing, and then but first I'll start out about talking about backing for inside the shed. What I mean by that, if we just kind of zoom inside the model here, the type of framing at this corner, spin around, is by nailing these two studs together for the corner connection. It gives a sturdy corner to the shed. It allows the siding to be nailed on and allows the trim boards to be nailed on the outside of the shed. So if there's nothing going on the inside of the shed, that's all the framing that's necessary in the corners. But let's see if I can get my layers dialog box up here. I made some pegboards. I put a piece of pegboard on this gable on the inside. If I kind of zoom out, you can see, okay, we're going to put something on the inside of the shed, sheetrock or plywood or OSB or possibly pegboard for hanging tools. And you can see the way this is set up. You could screw this pegboard to these studs. It would screw on each stud all the way across, fit and around the corners. Looks like I got this piece an inch and a half too high, so I'm just going to drop that down. 1.5 inches, okay. So there, it works fine for that sheet because there's studs there to nail it to. But if I put the other piece of pegboard, which I also put an inch and a half too high, if I show a piece of pegboard on the side, you can see that there's places to nail or screw that pegboard on all the way across, except for in the corner. I'm going to spin around to the outside of the shed, and there's nothing there. The pegboard is just floating next to the side piece. There's nothing to nail it to. In that instance, we need to add framing members. I call them backing. I'm sure there's other terms for it. So if we take and we move a piece of this pegboard over to this other side. I didn't pay very close attention to where I was grabbing that pegboard, so I'm going to grab it right on a corner so it lines up. Okay, now you can see that if this piece of pegboard, if it was pegboard or sheetrock, whatever, went in first, it could be nailed to that stud. And then on the sidewall, I added an extra stud with some blocking in it so that there'd be nailing for that end of the pegboard. You can see on the outside of the shed, this is just one simple way of building a corner, just with scrap blocks to give it some spacing, some place for installation, etc. That makes a very sturdy corner. And the other benefit of this corner is for lap siding, it allows a place for nailing on the outside of the shed. With our panel siding, it's not so important. You can see on my model here, I just scribbled corner on there. It looks like my carpenter scrawl when I'm doing wall layout, but this is one method that's like a blocked corner. And on the other side, just by way of an example, I put this simple corner in here by adding another 2x4 level. Sorry about that. There'll be a little hiccup in the video recording, but for some reason the 3D mouse quit working. As I was saying, the way this corner is constructed is just by adding a 2x4. I just call it a 2x4 on the flat in here. You can see how this is just nailed up. If you look at this corner from the top or the bottom, it looks like an L. And that serves to stabilize the corner. It gives some nailing for the inside of this. The drawback, the good part about this, it's real simple to do. It's easy to insulate this corner. Bad part is it doesn't give very much nailing here. By the time you get sheetrock running on this wall, say, then adding this in, that the amount of wood there that's available to nail onto is pretty small. I've always called that a California corner, and then this other one is called a blocked corner. But those pieces are necessary in some cases. They're part of the layout, but they're secondary to the layout just because of the way the 16-inch on center layout is. So there's times when the shed isn't ideally 8 foot square, it's some odd measurement. There'll be a layout stud near the corner, and you can incorporate the stud layout into the corner, or the corner backing layout into the stud framing. That, I hope that's not too confusing, but this 8 foot square shed's a little bit idealized, so some of the complexities you run into when framing things of different layouts, size, or construction, there'll be layout issues that'll come up that aren't covered very clearly in this tutorial. The principles are hidden in it, but they're not as obvious. All right, let's see. I'm just going to take the pegboard out of here and then go into the discussion about the rough openings. And I'll re-upload the shed model to the component warehouse so that it'll include this layout, stud spacing layout example, this little nest of 2x4s, how you can see the various layouts interact with each other in different spacing. I'll leave that in the model when I re-upload it to the component warehouse, so you can have that stuff to play around with. And now I'll just take this window wall here. Better get the whole thing. There it is. I'm just going to move it over next to here. And what I want to show, I hope I can communicate this, is that the rough opening for the window is, I'll just pull it out here. And oops, it looks like I made a copy of it when I pull it out of there, which I did not want to do. I just wanted to move it out. There must be a copy hidden in the wall. Okay, I'm going to get rid of one of them. Let's see, I'm going to go back here. Okay. Trying to think what's the best way to talk about this. I thought I had that set up to make it simpler. Okay, let's just get rid of that one. That's not going to work either. Let's do it this way. If I take this rough opening for the window, you can see that the rough opening consists of 2 full-length studs, king studs I believe everybody calls them, a couple shorter studs that support this header called cripples, sill plates, and then these are cripple jacks. They're cripples that are shorter. They support this sill structure. So that's definitely an overkill rough opening for a garden shed. But I wanted to put all the members in there so you could see how they apply to layout in general. So that's what's required for the window that I have in here. I'm not quite sure how this will show up, so I'll put the door and window in. All right, this window component fits into this rough opening. I think I can show this. And it's basically a 1/2 inch bigger than the window all the way around. That's a fairly typical dimension. So the finished opening of the window is exact, or the jamb opening is the exact size of it, and it's generally expanded by a 1/2 inch all the way around for a rough opening. That allows for inconsistencies in the lumber or the manufacture of the window or the plumb or straightness of the wall. But that's the purpose for the rough opening. And these are okay, let me hide the windows, door and window there. Not quite sure why that box kept showing up. Anyways, so that's what it requires. That's what a rough opening looks like when it's all framed in. And I can just incorporate this into the wall framing. And what I did in this case was, just because there's so much lumber involved, if I wanted to put the window here, for instance, I'd still have this stud on layout, and then it takes an additional king stud for the window on this side. See, I'm going to move that one more time. There we go. Just going to put it in an arbitrary location to show the fact that it requires this extra framing because it doesn't line up with the wall layout. So what I did on the shed was I made the window opening, the one king stud of the window opening here, I just put that stud on the layout, and then essentially eliminating one stud because the window location, I'm saying it's not as important. But that's just one trick you can do. You can line up one part of the window rough opening with a stud that's in the shed already, and eliminate some extra framing there. But regardless of how you do that, you can see where the window interrupts a full height stud coming down here. So that's where the stud gets cut on top of the header and underneath the sill plates. And everything applies the same there, with one exception. When we take this door opening, let's see how I set this one up. So if we this are groups, just so they stay together, and then move them into position just by zooming down in here. It's flipping around a little bit on me. And what I did was I centered this opening up on the center of the gable. And you can see here, this is different than the window on the side. I wanted the door to be in the center of this, so it's going to interrupt three studs that are on layout. All three of those studs would get cut, because I didn't want to compromise the layout of the door to save one stud and put the door off center. I hope that kind of makes sense. It's almost a little silly to have the discussion on this shed because it's so straightforward and simple, but on laying out a more complex structure, you'll face those issues fairly often. And they're just simple interactions with different framing members, but they need to be addressed one way or the other. I keep placing this rough framing other than a place I want it. The other thing, let's see, that talks about locating the door opening as opposed to the window in this particular case. Just going to keep clicking my back button here until I get rid of that. I'm going to take this framing out of here and then put this wall. Okay. The difference in the door opening and the window opening, and the door opening, I actually cut out this bottom plate so that the door can sit right on the floor. When framing the wall, I leave the bottom plate run all the way through the door, do all the framing, and then cut that piece of sill plate out of there in the end. That helps that whole wall structure stay solid and consistent while it's being framed, and it simplifies the whole process and gets the layout right, and then it's simple to just cut that plate out afterwards. There's a few instances where a person needs to cut that out ahead of time, but I'm saying that that's not in this case. So let's see, I want to move this wall framing. And then this wall back. That's in place. And that represents the shed framing with the rough openings in place, with a whole bunch of discussion about layout, backing, etc. I hope that's those things are clear enough. As I said, I'd like this to be an interactive process. So if I've missed some things or just bumbled through and there's questions you have, please post them as comments at the digital job site on the wall layout and framing basics blog post, and I'll address those for any viewers and hopefully bring some of that and bring the understanding as high as I can on the project. The next blog post and video tutorials will show the methods for actually framing the walls that are shown in this shed model. So I hope you'll come back and watch that segment. In the meantime, thanks for watching.